Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Membership Manager. In this week's training, I'm going to show you how to create this incredible membership managing application, complete with horizontal tabs, printing ID cards, sign in, sign out, completely with automated pictures, and we're going to have automated recurring invoices connected to that for your members. I'm going to show you how to do every single step, so I cannot wait. Let's get started. Alright, thanks so much for joining me today on this Membership Manager. I've got this incredible program to share with you. So much to show you on this, including search by name, search by ID, and a whole lot more. So we're going to show you that, including this really fantastic horizontal tab mechanism here that you can use on any type of application. Of course, signing in and signing out, we're going to be able to do that. They're going to be using barcodes or IDs or anything like that with this really cool fade out message and reoccurring invoices that make it look very familiar to just 2 weeks ago. So I've got that to show you and a whole lot more. I hope you'll stick with me for the entire training. I do bring these to you each and every Tuesday, absolutely free. In fact, this workbook is also absolutely free. Using the links down below in the description, you can pick that up with either your email or Facebook Messenger. Of course, if you'd like 200 of these applications, I've got that all wrapped up into a single zip file available for you for just $77. It's an incredible deal. I hope you'll pick it up. That also includes an incredible application library, and that means a single click to open that workbook and another click to view the training. So very convenient and a great way to help us out here. All right, don't forget to subscribe. Go ahead and click the subscription button there and the notification icon bell. That'll get you alerted when I do create these trainings. I cannot wait. Let's get started on this. So I'm going to show you every single step of how I did this. This is the Membership Manager. This is a great application whether you have a gym membership, whether you have a sauna spa membership, or any type of membership where members sign in and have recurring fees. You're going to be able to keep track of it, and I'm going to show you how to create your own application. Whether you want to download this application, customize it yourself, or just want to learn some of the tricks, I'm going to show you every step on this. So this says general information, right? We can keep track of any general information manager. We're going to be able to add and update a picture, print the ID or clear the picture, and we're going to be able to do lots of that just like this, with a few clicks of a button, including a barcode scanner, and also we're going to be able to print the ID to the default printer, so that's just a single click. And also we're being able to add new members, save members, delete, and automatically create an invoice for that just on one click. So it'll create an invoice, and then that invoice can be saved and will automatically be reoccurring each and every month based on the frequency. Now those frequencies can be relative. We've got member plans. So if we want to create membership plans, we can do that with this. So we'll be able to create any number of membership plans. I'm going to show you how to do that, of course. And the membership plans can have any type of frequency, whether we're on a weekly, day, or anything like that. We can create them on the last or first day of every month, on the first Monday of every month. Lots of frequency options, which may look very, very familiar, as we just covered this last week. If you don't, if not, no problem. I'm going to put links down below. And last week we covered this recurring invoice where we were able to create these recurring invoices. I'm going to include the link down below for this training because everything in this screen here was covered in the last training. And right now I'm going to show you how you can apply this to another program so we can put them together to build these really incredible programs. So these are step by step. However, this week we're going to focus on this Membership Manager with these horizontal tabs, multiple search features here that we have, and a whole lot more. So we're going to get started right away on that. Okay, so we've got a lot to show you. So we'll be covering this Membership Manager. How do we create these fields and where do they get saved? And then how do we get this sign in and sign out database? How do we scan these? If you have a barcode, if you have that ID that I just showed you on this, you print it out, you take this barcode, you put it into any USB keyboard scanner, barcode scanner, and it'll automatically scan it right here, and it will automatically display that and their picture associated with that. We've also got these invoices, and we've got a setup screen that we've added onto. Now we had a few setup screens. We now have item types. Let's go ahead and copy this. Let's paste the format, and I'm going to paste that format here just where we might have additional. Let's add one more row onto that one, and I'm going to paste special and paste format so it looks pretty much the same. And then we've got we've got item types, recurring, and one time. So we have also got weekly options. We had those in the recurring. So we've got, these are helpful for the recurring. And also some new things for this on this. We have member status now. So we can have different member statuses. Member can be active, they can be canceled, they can be on hold. We also have some application folders. Where are those members going to be stored? Those member pictures need to be stored somewhere. So when you download this file and those pictures aren't loading up for you, you wonder why. Well, that is because we have to map those pictures. If you want to use the same pictures that I have, all you have to do is simply join our Patreon, where I'm going to supply all of the resources associated with this training. This is where our members are located. We also have a default member picture in case there are no member pictures, and we can map that to a specific cell. So if you want to get these pictures and the icons and all the resources, go ahead and join us on Patreon, and I'll have updates there. So if you got any ideas or any feature requests, or you want me to fix something, I'm going to have that also available on our Patreon platform. I'll include the links down below. So we have a member pictures. What folder are member pictures located? I've got mine located directly inside here, something called member pictures. So they're all in here. And of course, inside that membership folder, I've also have that default picture. So I've attached that browse feature attached. So that information is going to be put in this cell. Our default picture is going to be located in this folder, and all of our member pictures are going to be located right here. Everything else is relatively the same. We're not going to focus on some of the other issues. This has to do with recurring invoices. And remember, I'm going to include the link down below. So if you did not see that recurring invoices and want to look up this information, I will include that link down below. That is recurring invoices. That's got a training that's independent and unique to this one. But I want to show you how we build upon these, right? So you can have both of them in a single download. Okay, so inside the members, we've got a few features. I'm going to start getting into this. First of all, how do we create this really cool tab feature? If you haven't seen this yet, I've got a unique training on this, but let's go over here. And basically what happens is on selection change event, when I make a selection change to E5, when I make a selection change to F5 or G5, something's going to happen. And all basically we're doing is hiding and showing rows. And of course, this group are also hiding and showing. So as you can see, rows 7 through 26 are displayed here. When I click the billing history, we see that 27 all the way down through, way down through 59 is displayed. And when I click on the scan out in history, all the other rows are hidden. And now we have rows 60 through 92 displayed. So basically we're hiding and showing rows associated with the tab. So when I click on general info, when I make that selection change, I also want to do one other thing, and that is I've got a group of shapes here. This is for the ID card. That group of shapes is going to be displayed only on the general info, and that group is called ID group, and that's displayed. So we put all those into a group, and that makes it really convenient. And we only want that group displayed when we click on the general info tab. And also, how do we get this look and feel? Take a look. Notice that the look of this tab is different than the look of this tab. How do we get that look different? Notice that the borders go up and around, but there's no border underneath the existing tab. Regardless of the tab that we select, it is a thick border all the way around and nothing under there. So how do we do that? Well, we use conditional formatting on that. If I were to highlight all the cells and go into Home and then Conditional Formatting and Manage Rules, we see that we have just some information on it. Now, it's a little bit unique because we've got based on this. So now every time we select a cell, what VBA is going to do is going to put that column number, and it's going to put it directly in B1 here. So when I select E5, you see that column number 5 is placed directly in B1. And then likewise, when I click billing history, it is going to be 6, and VBA is going to place it inside 7 inside B1. So the differentiating factor is that column number. So what I can do is I can then create conditional formatting based on that number. So let's take a look back inside that and look at some of the rules that we've applied. Now, also keep in mind that what I've done is I've taken this dark border, I put it around all the borders. So we look into Home, and then we look into the borders, or actually let's go into formatting those cells, and we take a look inside the border, and we see that we've got that thick border all the way around. So that is the actual border. So the changes of those borders are done with conditional formatting. So the actual borders have that thick border all the way around for every cell associated. So it is the conditional formatting that's going to make that bottom border disappear, and it's going to put that thin border up on top and to the right. And why do we do that? Because conditional formatting can only apply one style of border. But what if I want a thick border? Well, then our original border has to be that thick border, and our conditional formatting will have to do that thin border, because conditional formatting, we can only apply one style of borders. What do I mean by that? Conditional formatting and manage rules. If we take a look at any rule here and we edit that rule, we go into the format, and we can see that we can only apply one style of format. We can apply dotted lines, but there's no thick, thinner border. We don't have that availability, at least in this version of Excel, which is 2010. And I don't believe it's changed even up to the current versions. So, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So with that one style of border, so what do? So we apply that style of border directly to that. So for example, we know that if B1 equals 5, B1 equals 5, and that would be this E is selected. In that case, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the right is selected, the right border is displayed. Okay, likewise, here we go. On B1 is 7. If it's 7, what do we want to show on 7? In that case, F5 is going to take on, let's take a look at that rule directly, the left border, right? So we're basically specifying borders based on whatever selected. Now it's based on F5, right? So that means F5 is going to play that, right? Why is that? When I select this, where do I want that thin border? I want that thin border directly on the right side of F. If we take a look at this, I want that thin border right here, and I want that thin border right here. So on those two, I want to play. However, if I select F5, and this is 6, I want that thin border on the left in the top, and I want that thin border here on the right on the top. So basically, it's just a number of conditional formatting. We don't need to necessarily go into every single rule, but basically that's it. We're just applying the borders based on that, okay? So sometimes it's if it does not equal the existing column, if it does not. So that works too. And also what I want to do is whatever the current column is, I want to make sure that the font is bold. If we take a look at this one, we see that the font is regular here and here, but the one that's selected is bold. So we want to make it selected. So to do that, all we need to do is based on the existing column number. If the existing column number equals bold, the existing column number in B1 equals what was selected, we want to format that bold. So that automatically makes it bold. And also one more thing, what we want to do is we want to make sure that that bottom border is missing. So when we edit that rule and go into the formats, we see that I've cleared out the bottom border here. That bottom border is missing for the selected column. For the selected column, if it's B1 equals the column that you selected, then the border is going to be missing. And we're going to apply that to those columns. Okay, so it is the selection change event that all we need to do is make that change, and then we run the macros to load those tabs. So let's go into the VBA and take a look at how we did that. So into the developers, VBA, Alt F11 will get you there. And of course, we're going to be focused on this members sheet, and it's based on a selection change. If the user makes a selection between E5 and G5, if the user makes a selection to more than one cell, we're going to exit the sub. That gives me the ability to highlight these without anything to happen. I don't want this macro to run when I highlight more than one, right? If I select one, fine. If I select more than one, nothing's going to happen. It makes it easier, especially in training. So that's why we have this. If the target count large is greater than 1, then exit the sub. Okay, so if the user makes a selection change, a single cell between E5 and G5, we want something to happen. First thing I want to do is to make things a little bit faster, and also to avoid this flash is I want to turn off application screen updating. And then what I want to do is I want to run a specific macro based on whatever cell they selected. If they have selected E5, we're going to run this macro called tab general info. F5, they're going to select tab billing. And likewise, G5, we're going to go check in, check out. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to select something else, right? I want to get that selection out of whatever cell they've selected. And to do that, so we're just going to select F3. So no matter what is selected, F3 becomes the one selected. So we've shown that. And now what I want to do is turn on application screen updating. Okay, so that's all we have to do. So these three macros are located in a brand new module called tab macros. So tab macros, we look, and I've just got those three macros here, and they're relatively simple. Okay, so if they've decided to click on that that original cell located here, E5, then I want this macro to run. The first thing what I want to do is I want to set that column number. You could easily use active cell column or whatever you want, but that probably wouldn't work until after they select it. So we're just going to set it to 5. That's going to set 5, 6, and 7. We're going to do that for each one of them. And then also what I want to do is I want to display a certain number of rows. So we're going to display rows 7 through 26 by doing an entire row dot hidden equals false. So display rows. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Displaying those rows. Those are the original rows that we want to display for those, the ones that we discussed. And so after we do that, we want to hide the remaining rows. So 27 through 92, those get hidden. And then the last thing, as we mentioned, the ID group, those groups of shapes, those are the group shapes associated with that ID card, those 3 buttons along with all the shapes inside the ID. I want to display that. So we're going to do that with shapes ID group dot visible equals MSO true. That's going to show that ID group. Now for the remaining tabs, it's relatively simple. Again, we're changing the column number, the selected column number. We are going to show different rows, 27 through 59, we're actually showing. Hidden equals false means we're actually displaying those rows. And then we're going to hide the other rows, the original general info rows, 7 through 26. We're going to be hiding those. And of course, the last tab, the check in, check out, or actually I say sign in, sign out, it should be called, entire row hidden equals true. We're going to hide those. And then we want to make sure that the ID group is not displayed. It is only displayed for this general info group. So we're going to hide it here, and we're going to also hide it here. And then likewise, the last one, check in, check out, or sign in, sign out, probably, is going to be 60 through 92. Those are the ones that are going to be displayed. And then 7 through 59, we're going to be hiding. And also, that's it. So pretty much it makes sure the group is hidden. So that's it for the tabs. It's relatively simple to create your own automated tab, horizontal tab, and I've got a training covering that entirely, but it's relatively simple. Okay, so that's it. So now what I want to do is I want to show you some of the components of this screen now that we understand how the tabs work. And basically what we have is the billing history, all of the invoices that were created for a specific member, and all of their history of when they've signed in and signed out here. So I want to know that. And so how do we display that information? Well, first of all, it's all based on a member ID. Now that member ID is based on this member list here. So we have a list of members. Now these members lists all contain a member ID. They all have a member name, a status, the address. So all the fields are located here, including their picture, which is located in column A, the plan that they're on, and also the next payment, a start date, and some notes if possible. All right, so we have all of that, and it's all using data mapping. Now, data mapping is going to help us map that data. That means F7 is located that member name is located directly here inside F7. So we want to map whatever's field, while H7 here is mapped directly to our member list here inside the status. So we've mapped each one, and what that's going to do is going to allow us to quickly either save the information from our sheet-based form or load it from our database here or table list here into the sheet forms using this map data. So that makes it just a few lines of code, even though we have a lot of fields. And so that's going to help us do that. All right, so we have that. So we also want to know the member ID, right? Each member ID is very important. And we've created some named range to track that. So let's take a look inside our member list here and go into the formulas and a name manager. And we have some news. So we're going to look at member ID. This member ID, if we tab over that, we're going to see we're using a dynamic named range using offset starting in the header row A3 going all the way down, right? We start in the header row because when there's no data at all, we want to make sure that there's no errors. So we start on row 3, but then we make sure to compensate by moving one row down using the offset. And then what we also want to do is we want to count all of that, the columns, including the header row, but also we need to compensate for that header row by subtracting 1. We're including the header row here, again, because there's no data, it's not going to create any errors. So if the data gets deleted, we know it's not going to create an error. Okay, so we have a member ID, we have a member name located here, a member phone here, and we've got a few other information member folder here. That's going to be, of course, located in the setup screen, and a member plan name, right? We've got that's in the member plans. So basically for this, we just have a few fields. So I want to go over and show you that to make sure that we have that. In fact, I want to make sure that we have the tab because I've member email, we have the located. I want to make sure we've got all the right data. Member phone, that's going to help us. I'm going to slide over here, making sure that we got, okay, the phone is good. So everything looks good here. So we're going to use the same offset for each one of those fields. So inside, we want to make sure we know what that member ID is. Now that member ID you can see is not displayed here, but we do have it here inside that, and it's based on B4. Now B4 is always going to have our member ID here, and it's also going to be displayed on our ID card. So we understand B1 is a select tab. This one is for the member name. So if I search the member name here, I want that ID to be associated with that inside B2. Here's the member. So we can load a member up based on either the name or based on either the ID. So we can load it in two different ways. So this field is the search based on the name. And what I want to do here is I want to display the ID. So whatever name they've searched here, I want to display the ID here. I'm going to stop the code so we can see exactly how that happens. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll go inside our members here, and we're going to use the change, right? We're focused on the change event, right? This is the member name search, right? So when we do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, right, let's go ahead and stop it, right? We don't want that member to load. I just want it stopped at that point. So when I search a name here, we see that it's been stopped exactly where we want it to stop. And we also see that we have a member ID that's associated with this. What we're going to do is we're going to take this ID and we're going to place it directly inside B4, and that'll come in just a moment. So we've done that. So what I want to do is I want to make sure, does this ID exist? So how do we extract that? Well, we can use the index. We're going to index that member ID, and we're going to match it based on the member name that was used. If that doesn't exist, it would create an error, and therefore it'll be blank. If it is blank, we need to let the user know that they've made an incorrect selection or an incorrect entry of their name. However, if this does contain an ID, we know it is correct. We can take this ID, and I'm going to place it directly in B4. So we can continue on with our code now and load that up. So it'll load that name. So you see how it was there. And then once we have it, we're going to clear this selection. Once we've loaded it up correctly, we can then clear whatever's in F3, allowing the user to add another search name in there. So we can clear that name here, and we're going to do the same thing for ID. Now the ID is going to be based on a row. I want a row that's associated with this ID. If they enter an ID, I want a row associated. So let's go ahead and stop that code, because that's going to be based on H3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it right here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to load in there. Okay, so now it's been stopped, and we see that we have a row that's been associated with that. We're going to use just the match. So we're using a match based on the member ID that was entered here. Once that does, if it is blank, of course, it's not the correct ID. If it's not blank, then I want to display the row, and we're adding 3 because our membership IDs start on row 4 of that table. So that will ensure row. So I know that it's row 7. If I know that that's correct and we've returned a row, then all I need to do is take this ID and place it directly inside B4. And that's exactly what we've done inside the code. So again, if in this one, number search, if B2 is empty, then we know they haven't entered the correct name. We can exit the sub. Otherwise, take whatever's in B2, which is that ID, and place it directly in B4. Right? Remember, once we have a good search, take whatever's in B2 and place it directly in B4. Likewise, now all we need to do is make sure we have a row. If I have a correct row, all I need to do is take whatever's in H3 and place it directly in B4. That's going to put the correct ID in the correct place. So that's what we've done right here. B4 equals H3. That's going to load that member ID. Then all we need to do is run the macro, which we're going to go over shortly, called member load. So if we continue on with that code, it is going to load that member. So that's how we do that. It's a multi-search based on either ID or name, and it's going to always place that ID here. So the ID gets placed, whatever the ID is, placed right here. And also what we would do is we want the member row. I want to know the row that's associated with the ID located directly inside B4. Using match, we can get that match, and plus 3 is the same formula, but this time the formula is based on the ID located in B4. I also want to know the next member number. Now, the next member number, of course, we're going to use the max formula. As long as all of our member IDs contain numerical values, we can use the max. So the next one's going to be 10131. So using numerical, max plus 1 is going to get us there. So we're going to use the max member ID plus 1. That will get us there. All right, that's pretty much it. Now what we do is, I'm going to go over this one in a moment, and that's going to have to do with our name. But now all we need to do is, we know we've got the correct member ID. We know we've got the correct row. So we can use that inside VBA to load up all of this data and fill it in we know it's going to come directly from our member list right here. So all we need to do is use a simple little lines of code to automatically, we know we've already got the ID in B4, so we can start it in column 2, and we can run a loop all the way to the last column, and that last column is notes. So if we type in equals column, we got to know what column, all the way to column 14. So we're going to run a loop from column 14. Let's go into the macros that we just saw here called member load. If I want to go in here, I'm just going to right click and go to definition. Sorry, that's off the screen. If I want to quickly go to it, just do like this, right click the macro and go to definition. And that's going to bring us to this module here. Now this module is called member macros. And I've got the associated macros that are going to help us. And this one's called member load. And the only one above is called member save. Oh, we do have a few above it. So let's go into member load, and then we'll go up the top since we were just focused on that. So we're going to focus on this member sheet. The first thing we want to do is clear out all the associated cells including, right? So not only do I want to clear out all the cells that are located here, I want to clear out all the cells for the billing history and the scan and out history. So I want to do that automatically. This one's got some data in here, so I want to clear out all these cells here, and I also want to clear out all these cells. So I want to clear everything out associated, so that one line of code will take care of that. Next one, I want to make sure that B5, we have to have a row. I've got to have a row that's associated with this member. If for some reason that is empty, we need to let the user know that they've incorrectly selected either an ID or name. So if B5 equals empty, then please enter a correct member or ID to load the member. So we could probably put member name here. Name or member ID, that might be a little more clear, or member ID, okay? And then that'll let the user know we're going to exit the sub. Without that member row, once we have it, we can put it into a variable called member row. That's a long variable. And then, as I mentioned before, starting in column 2, going all the way to 14, we can then use another variable called member column to load that. So all we're going to do is using data mapping, and we're already focused on the member sheet. So what we need to do is we need to find the range, that specific cell, to put that data in. That's going to be located directly here. And what is coming from the member database on row 1, right? Our cells are located in the member column. So it's right here. And it is this range we're going to place the data in here. Remember, it's going to come directly from our member list right here. F7, H7. So all we're doing is extracting those cells, and that's where we're going to get the data. I know the row already, and I know all I have to do is loop through and bring this on hold and put it into H7, bring this address and put it into F9, and so on and so forth. And we can do that with this loop. Now, these 3 lines of code we can use regardless of the number of columns or fields that we have. We can use those 3 lines of code. That's called data mapping. Okay, so we're going to load the data. And now all I need to do is show the member picture, right? Member show picture. We're going to run a macro that's going to show that. I'll go over that in a moment. Run a macro that's going to load that billing history, and another macro that's going to call load the sign in and out history, right? So we've got additional macros that are going to load the billing history and load the scan out. It makes it a little bit easier when we break it up into individual macros, although it's not entirely necessary. And that's it. So I also want to do, here's the picture that we're going to show. So how do we do that? So let's go back up to the top of this module and focus on some of the other macros, all right? The first one is member add a picture, right? I want a macro that's going to add a picture. It is the macro that's tied to this button. If I add that picture and I will click OK, I want that picture to show up here. So we've got a few different macros. One that's going to load the picture, and that name of that picture is going to go directly inside J20. So how do we do that? Well, first thing we need to make sure is we actually have to have a folder here that contains our member pictures. So that's very important. I get a lot of messages saying, hey, the pictures won't load. Make sure you follow this training. Make sure you update this. Make sure you join our Patreon and get all my pictures too. So this is a variable called member folder here. So I want to make sure that that variable contains an accurate folder, and that folder contains our pictures. To do that, so that's the first thing that we're going to check. And so here, if setup range member folder equals empty, if there's a missing folder, let the user know to please add a member folder, exit the sub. Okay, assuming that it's not empty, what we can do is we can set a variable, a string variable called picture folder based on the setup member folder, and we're also going to add a backslash onto that. And now what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is accurate. If the picture folder directory equals empty, then please make sure to select a correct folder. member folder in the setup screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that up. In fact, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to place it directly in here. This is the macro that's going to run that. That particular macro is one that does this right here. When we click this button, it is that macro that browses for the folder. All right, so we have that and we pasted it in and let the user know. Once we've completed those, we know that they have a folder. We know that that folder is accurate. We can then move on. We're going to set a picture file. It's going to be equal to the application file dialog file picker, right? We want to pick a specific file here. We're going to add that picture. It is a picture. And we also want to focus on it. Please select member picture. You know where I stole that from now, don't you? All right. Please select from the recipe manager. Yeah, it's a really cool program. Okay. Please select a member picture, right? And the filters. We don't want to just have any file. We want to have only picture files. So to do that, we want to make sure it's .jpg, PNG, GIF, or you can also add additionals, but I've kept it pretty simple, right? And what we want to do is we want to select only a single file. We're going to allow multi-select equals false. If they cancel out of it, the dot show is going to be something other than -1. So in that case, we're going to go to no selection. It's going to skip all the way everything else. However, if they have selected a file, what I want to do is I want to then extract that and I want to place it inside a path. So what I want to do is I want to set that full picture path. There's going to be a brand new picture path. Wherever they have pulled that picture from, what I want to do is I want to place it inside our member folders. So to do that, we have our picture folder. And then what I want to do is I want to extract the name, just the file name only, not the entire file path. To extract that name, we can use the directory function, the directory of the .selected items. In other words, this is the entire path of whatever they've selected, the entire full path. But I only want the name, so I'm going to take that name and using the directory, it's going to extract the name. So if I take that name and I add it to picture folder, that is going to be our brand new file path, right? So if for some, now what I want to do is I want to make sure to see, does that full picture path, does it exist already? So if the picture path equals the selected items, in other words, how would that happen? That means if we're already picturing, if I'm already adding a picture, so let's say what I want to do is I want to copy this picture. I want to put a picture from somewhere, desktop, inside, let's say I want to select this picture or one of those pictures, and I want to put it directly inside this folder. How do I do that? But what if I select a picture already inside the folder? What if it's already there? Well, in that case, I don't need to copy it from its existing location into this folder because it's already there. So how do we account for that? Well, we check if the picture path is equal to the select items, meaning the same path that we want to move it to, then we don't need to copy it over. We're going to skip the copy and go all the way down here. However, if it doesn't exist in that picture folder, what we can do is we can then copy it over. But we only want to copy it over if for some reason it doesn't exist. If the picture, we probably don't need this line, right? This one here means it already exists inside the folder, so I probably wouldn't. We probably don't need this. This probably we can get rid of. So basically this line says if it exists in the current folder, then kill it. But we've already checked it here, so we don't need both. However, if you want to do that, right, I'm going to comment this out, but I'm going to keep it there. However, if you want to just delete it from its current location, then you can do it. But we don't want to delete it from its current location. We've already checked that it doesn't exist. It doesn't have the same path. Okay, but we'll keep it in. So let's say there's a scenario where you could have both. Let's say here you're adding a picture. It is possible. You're adding this picture here, but you're taking the exact same picture. It's already on your desktop, but it's already in this folder. In other words, the same picture is in two different locations. However, so what you want to do is you're going to add it from the existing location. You may want to delete it here first before you add it in. So we'll keep that in there in the rare scenario that you have the same folder. So what this will do is it'll check, does it exist in the existing folder? If it does, it's going to delete it. So we'll keep it in, remove the picture if it exists. Okay, next up, now what I want to do is I want to copy it from its current location into the picture folder. So we can use the file copy, and we're going to use the original location, which is the selected items, which is the full path, and then we're going to paste it over into the picture path, which is the updated, the destination file. It's going to copy that member picture into the members picture folder. Okay. All right. So that's it. So now all we want to do is I want to take the file name of that and I want to place it directly inside J20 here. So we can do that here. Members J20 here equals the directory selected. And remember, that directory takes only the name, not the full file path. It's going to set that picture name. Then what I want to do is I want to run another macro that's actually going to display that picture. So a different macro to actually display it. And that's the macro called right here, member show picture. First of all, that picture name is going to be located in J20, as we know we've set it here. But if that's empty, then what we want to do is clear the picture, right? There's nothing. There's a macro that clears the picture. We'll go over that macro next, and we're going to exit the sub. But assuming that we do have a value inside J20, I want to set that into a picture file. So first of all, we want to extract the picture folder from the member folder here. I want to add the backslash just as we did previously. Then what I want to do is I want to make sure it's accurate. So that picture folder, right, if it's inaccurate, it'll be empty. Please make sure to set a correct member folder in the setup screen, and we're going to exit the sub. Then what we want to do is we want to add a picture path. And then that picture path, we could probably do this. Let's do this. I'm going to set the picture path first, and then we're going to double check. This is probably set the picture path first, the picture folder along with whatever's in G20. Then I'm going to check the entire path. This is probably better. Then we're going to check the entire path of that directory. If that's not accurate, please make sure to select a correct member folder. Okay. All right. So now we're checking to make sure that it's a correct path. If it is, then we can do the following, right? What I want to do is I want to add that picture in here, but we have this particular picture here, this one here called picture frame here. The name of it is called picture frame. That's part of a group. That's right. It's part of a group called ID group. So when it's part of a group, I want to call that specific picture out, the one it's part of the group items. It's one of the items of that group. So it is the ID group picture frame that we want to do. I want to take this little frame here and I want to fill it with a picture, right? If we want to change it, we can give it that round look. That might look kind of nice. So we can do here. So it gives us the ability to do that if we want to do. So what I want to do is I want to fill this frame with that picture. We know the path of that picture. So all we need to do is based on this shapes, ID group, picture frame, fill it with the user picture, and that user picture, the path is here, picture path. That's going to set the picture. And also in our clear picture, we're going to make it hidden, right? So what I want to do is I also want to make sure it's visible, just in case it got hidden, which it will in this one. I want to make sure it's visible. So we need one more step to ensure that anytime we hide a picture, we need to make sure that it's visible. So also the fill visible equals true. We're going to ensures picture is visible. Okay, we want to make sure that it's visible. And that could happen. It could be hidden because we're going to clear the picture. That's the next macro. So this macro is going to display the picture. This is going to clear it, right? If I want to clear that picture, I'm going to do it with a single macro. It's just going to take that default picture. That default picture is set up right here based on locate, and I've given it a name called default member picture. So in that, I want to take that and clear it. So when I add the picture again, it adds it up or it clears it. So that clear picture, the macro tied to this button is going to clear out that picture. And we can do that with the following. First of all, I want to set that default picture based on the setup screen and that default member picture. The value here, that's the default member picture. Usually I use that, but you can of course use anything you want, default member picture. So we want to set that into a string variable. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that that is correct. I want to make sure that that path is correct, although there really is one. If the directory of default does not equal empty, right, meaning it is an accurate path, then I want to do the following. First thing what I want to do is I want to fill that same picture frame based inside that group, that member shapes ID group items. One of those items is the picture frame. That picture frame, I'm going to fill it with the user picture. This time it's going to be the default picture. And I also want to make sure, again, it's visible equals true. Visible equals true. However, what if it's blank? What if there's no picture at all, right? What if the default picture isn't correct, or maybe we haven't set it up? Then what do I want to do? How could that happen? Well, maybe we have an incorrect default picture. If I change this incorrect, if I change just the name of this, right, default PISC or whatever, it's now incorrect, right? So we don't have a default picture. If I do clear picture, I just want to clear the picture. Notice we don't have a default picture because I changed the name of this. So when that happens, what I want to do is I want to clear whatever is there. So to do that, notice it got cleared. Now if I set clear, I've just reset it. So to do that, I want to do this, else, right? Let's just call it no default picture. So in the no default picture, all I want to do is make the visible equals false, right? So we're hiding whatever is filling there. If we do this, right, and we try to show it, it's not going to show. Again, we have to make it visible equals true again. So when we take this step, it's hide picture. So that was the only way that I could. There is no, I wish it was like something else like clear. It should be, there should be a thing that says fill.clear, that you can clear the picture, but I don't see that. I don't think it exists, right? So visible equals false works, but then you have to make sure it is visible again, and make sure it's visible equals true, right? It would be nice if there was a feature that said fill.clear and then just clears whatever's there and it deletes it, but I didn't see that. All right, so hide picture will do just fine for us, and then we need to show it. If you guys do know a better way around it, do that, because that way I could avoid this and I could avoid this if there's simply just a clear option, but I didn't see that. So clearing the picture, that's it. It's a nice way to show default pictures, clear it if you don't have a default picture, and show it around. So we'll go ahead and add a picture to this person here, and now we have it. The names don't coincide with the names, so don't worry about that. All right, continuing on. So now we have that, but what do we want to do is we've focused on the load. We know how to get the data in here, but when I click save, how do we update this data? How do we take all of that data and make sure that we save it back into the member list, whether it's an existing row or a brand new row, right? If it's a brand new member, we'd also need to save it to a brand new row. If we click new member and I put in a member name called Fredders, I want that saved to a brand new row. Saving the member here, it's going to be saved to a brand new row here. So how do we differentiate? No, it's an existing. Well, we know based on this, right? If I add new, let's click members and click new one, we see that there's no member name. There's no member ID. We've cleared out the member ID here, right? Right here located in B4, we cleared out this. So as we cleared out, we know that there's no row in B5. If B5 is empty, we know it is a brand new member. However, if we load an existing member, we see that B5 contains the row number. So B5 is going to be our differentiator. Okay, so first of all, we want to ensure when we're saving, we want to make sure that they at least have a member name. So F7 is required. So if F7 equals empty, please let the user know to add before saving that name. We're going to exit out. Okay, again, we're going to use our differentiator. B5 equals empty. This would be a new member. Otherwise, it's an existing member, new member. So if it's a new member, we need to get a brand new row. It's going to be the first available row located in our members database. And then what we're going to do is we're going to assign it a brand new member ID. That new member ID is going to be coming using our max formula located in B6. I'm going to take whatever's in here. I want to place it directly in B4. I also take whatever's in here, and I want to place it directly inside column A, that brand new row. Everything else is the same regardless if it is a new or an existing. So we're going to do just that. B4 is going to take on whatever's in B6. That's our new member ID. And also I want to take that new member ID. I want to place it directly inside column A and that row that we've now assigned. So that's going to take on the new member ID. These are the only few things we need to do if it is a new member. However, if it's an existing member, all I need to do is want to extract the row located from B5. That is our member row. Okay, so once we have our member row, then everything else is the same. And again, another 3 lines of code regardless of the data using the data mapping. And all we need to do is go from 2 to 14, just as we did before. We'll just call this data mapping. And the data mapping, again, is simply doing exactly the reverse of what we did here, right? When we're saving them here, all we need to do is just take, all the way down here, the loading up here. All we're doing here is taking whatever's inside the database and we're placing it inside the form. However, in saving, it's completely the opposite. We are taking here whatever's inside the form here and placing it inside the database here, based on whatever's located in row 1. That cell is located in row 1 right here, located in row 1. So all we're doing is we're taking whatever is in F7, H7, or F9 and placing it inside that associated row. That's it. That's it for data mapping. And then also what I want is a fade out message. It's a nice message, right? When I save that, you may have seen that before. Let's scroll over here. And I decided to save that. Remember, we see there's a called member save. You see that? It showed up real quick here, and that's let us know. It's a nice way of showing that it's been saved without that pop-up in which the user has to, like if we have a message pop-up, the user has to say click OK, and it gets kind of annoying. This way they're notified that it's been saved, but they don't need to do anything. They don't need to take any action. And we can do that with a fade out message, and we've used several in this program. We've gone over it before, but basically all we're going to do is we're going to create a shape, and this one's called member saved message. It's a simple shape. And we're just going to run a loop, in this case from 1 to 100. And we're going to change the transparency of that shape based on this. If you want to make it slower, you can add times, or you can add here to make this 200, 200. And then all we're going to do is just run a loop with a short delay and as it fades out. And so the first thing we do is make it visible. The last thing we do is make it hidden. And then we increase the transparency as we loop through it. Relatively simple. Okay, the member load we already went over. And now we have the load. This one's loading the sign out history. We have two different macros. Those different macros are going to do two things. One's going to load that billing history. If we have, let's pull up some another particular member that has data, billing history, and that's going to be all the invoices associated with that member. We also have the scan in and out history based on this person coming and going inside that screen, coming directly from this screen. So I want to load that information. Now that's data located. So our billing history, we've got that located inside our invoice list, item list here, invoice item. Let's pull this invoice list here. So what I want to do is I want to know specific invoices for a specific member. If I have all of our invoices that were created and I know the member ID that's associated with it, what I can do is I can then extract only those invoices based on a specific member and put that into some criteria. Then what I can do is I can extract those results into a table and then bring over those results and bring them directly inside here. And that's just what I've done here using an advanced filter. So it's a very, very simple macro. All we need to do is, in this case, we're focused on the invoice. Let's go on invoice list first. Then we'll go the invoice list. We're going to determine the last row. If it's less than 3, then we're going to exit the sub. We're going to run an advanced filter, A2 through F. We're going to have the criteria I2 through I3, and we're going to have those results come K2 through N3, and that's just what I've done right here inside the invoice list. Last row, getting it, running our criteria I2 through I3. The results are coming from K2 through N. Once I have the results, we're going to determine the last row. If that last row is greater than 2, we're going to take that and just bring that information over. We're up to a limit. So also, we're going to do that. In fact, I need to set the limit here. But what we can do is if we know, I'm going to update this. If I know that we have a certain number of limits, so we do in this case, our limit is, well, let's say 59. So our limit here is 31 rows. So all we need to do is just bring over 31 rows of data, right? If I know that last row here inside our invoice list, so we can focus on that 31. So inside our invoice list here, right, all we need to do is bring over 31 rows. So if we bring over all the data from here all the way until, let's say, row 33, that should be sufficient. I'll make that update right now because we have a limit. Once we're in a limit, right? So we don't necessarily need the last row. Right, we can if the last row, this is fine up until now, but what we're going to do instead of this, right, we know we have a limit, right, we can just bring over all the data, so we can do it for E29 through H&1. Let's take a look back on this screen here, E29 all the way through. Let's take E59, 59 being the last row. Why don't we just set that here? So instead of the last row, this works great when you have an unlimited, but we have a limited row, right? On this one, at least we do. The billing history, kind of theoretically, we don't have it in the scan out history. It is our last tab. We could go on forever. Notice there's a picture background here. I wanted to change something up here. So this is not a color, cell color. It's actually a picture background. Okay, so what we want to do for this specific tab, let's set a limit of row 59 so it doesn't bleed into the other tab. To do that, we just need to set a limit. So 59 is a row. So all we need to do is say H and then change this to 59 and then put that in a quotation. And then remember, we also want to make sure we have the same number of rows, 31. So we just change this to 34, right? So as we did on our results here, let's look back in our invoice list here, right? We want to go all the way down to 33. That'll cover our rows. 33 here, highlighting those. We see we have 31 rows. That'll be sufficient because we have to include that. So 33, and that's going to bring over all the data regardless, or at least up to that, right? Now, let's say you're creating a large program, but you only want a limited show. You only want to show this many rows. But what if a user wants to see all of the data? Well, in that case, what you do is you create just a little bit of an icon here saying something like show all data. And then what you do is you send the user over to this screen and you run an advanced filter, or to another screen where it shows all of the data based on that member. So you could send them to a separate screen. That's what I would do. And that's what I've done inside the accounting program in our mentorship. Great. So there are options, of course, that we have. So I've made that update here. So when we click on the members and we click on the billing history, no difference in the results, right? Because we have limited, but inside the code, there's a slight difference. Scan out in history is fine as it is. Scanning out in history, load the scan out. We're going to do exactly the same thing, but this time we're focused on the sign in and out database. We're focused on a different database. So if we look on this database, Something very, very similar here, just all the data that's for signing in and out, right? We have our member ID, the date, the sign-in date, the sign-out date and time, any notes, and the row associated with it. We have our criteria here. It's also based on the members before, just as our invoice list here, also based on members before, right? It's based directly on the link that's associated right here. That member ID here, always based on that criteria member ID. So we're going to run that criteria, and again, I have the results in exactly the same order as I want them. All I need to do is bring in this data and directly in here. So that's all we're going to do with this, making sure that we run our advanced filter, getting the last row, and then as long as we have data, we're going to bring that data inside here, the login out history right here, this sign out history. So bringing that data in here, exactly the same, just the different cells. Okay, add new is relatively simple. All we're doing is simply clearing out the cells for add new. We're running the macro to clear the picture. That's why it's nice to have that in a separate macro. We're going to set the tab right. I want to automatically run the macro to select general info, select general info tab. Why is that important? Well, it's kind of a nice feature. If I'm looking at a specific tab right here, sign out in history, and I click new member, maybe I want to go directly to that general info. So notice we've run the macro that's not only going to clear out the fields, but the macro that's going to actually select it. So that macro is going to do that for us. It's going to automatically do that. Okay, that's it. And I want to just select something else. Member F7, select a different cell. All right, great. So now what we have is we've gone over a lot of macros. We also want to do a few things. I also want to create the invoice, right? Creating the invoice. Now, this is a great feature. First of all, we want to make sure that we have a saved member. I want to make sure. And if I create the invoice, I want to make sure that they have a membership plan associated. We can create multiple membership plans. We'll get into that in just a moment. But this membership plan is going to let us know more information. I'm going to save that member. And now I know what membership plan to bill this customer. Our membership plans are located right here. Membership plans have a plan name. They have a plan amount. And they have a description. And they also have a frequency. How often are we going to bill it? That membership plan is saved in the table below. So if I know it's got an associated membership plan, when I decide to create the invoice for that member, I know automatically what item to bill. I know the description. I know the price of that and how much to bill them. And I also know all the frequency that's set up. So when we save that invoice, it's automatically going to save and create an invoice. And then it's going to automatically reoccur automatically. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we automatically? Notice if I change the member here to Lisa here, who's already got monthly gold, let's change her to monthly bronze so we can save that member here. And then we create an invoice. We notice now it's monthly bronze. We notice that our member is now Lisa. We notice it's got different frequency and a different price, right? So it's automatically created. So how do we do that? All right, well, let's go over the macro that does that. It's called the member create invoice. That is the macro that's been assigned to that button. The first thing I want to do is dimension the plan row as long. And I want to make sure that we have a saved member. I don't want to be able to create invoices. It could create real problems if we're creating invoices for members that have not even been saved yet. So we certainly want to make sure they already are saved. To do that, we want to make sure that they have a member row associated in B5. If B5 is empty, please prompt the user to first save the member before creating it. So B5 equals empty. Please save this member before creating an invoice. Okay, I also want to make sure that we have a plan, right? If I'm going to be adding a member, creating an invoice, I want to make sure that there's a plan, a membership plan that's associated with this member, right? So if F15 or it doesn't exist, I want to make sure that that happens. So if B15, actually B15 is a plan row, right? I need to know a row associated with this plan, right? If we take a look here, I've got a member plan name, a named range called member plan name. If we go inside our member plans, I have a named range associated with these plan names. Looking into the formulas, name manager, going into member plan here. Member plan name is, of course, a dynamic named range based on those plan names. So what I want to do is I want to know a row associated with that 16, 17, 18, 19. I want to know the row that's associated with that plan. So if I know bronze is located based on row 18, right? So if B15 is empty, I know that there was an error that it doesn't exist, right? If I click new member, we see that B15 is empty. I want to make sure that B15 contains a row actually. And to do this, we want to just check it. So we're going to use that match formula to make sure, and we're also adding 15 in this case is I want to know the row. And notice that our rows on our members start on row 16. So if we're going to have a match, we need to add 15 because we want the row that's been associated to that. So if B15 equals empty, then we know that they have not added a plan, or maybe not a correct plan. So we're just going to let the user know to make sure that they add a plan first, and we're exiting the sub out. All right, now assuming that we've met those two requirements, we can then set a plan row, member plan row, right? That is the row that's been associated. Now in this particular member plans right here, both our form and our actual data are located on the same sheet, right? So we want to know a row that's associated. I'm going to have to extract the amount. I need to know the amount. I need to know the frequency. And I need to know all this information. This is based on the frequency because all of this information is going to get filled into this. The frequency here, it's all going to be filled in here. So I need to know that. I need to extract that from the row. So to do that, we're going to put that row inside a variable here. And I'm going to run a macro called invoice new. That macro is going to basically clear out the existing invoice. Clear out existing invoice. Whatever's located there is going to clear it out. Next thing what I want to do is I want to take all that data. I want to fill in that invoice. For example, I want to take that member name and I want to put it in I5 of the invoice, right? I want all that information to come over. So because I want that I5, right, that name to come here. I want the item to come into H10. I want that item description. I want the quantity defaulted as 1 and the cost to come here. So that first line of code. I also want all of the information from that member, the frequency, whether it's a monthly or daily or even weekly. I want that information to come in on the form here. So we're going to bring all that information over. So these lines of rows do that. H10 is going to take on the plan name. I10 is going to take on that plan description for that first row of the invoice. That default quantity is going to be in column J10, and then the price, that plan amount, is going to come directly from the member plans in E. Some of that information is going to come directly from here. Those member plans here, right? So column E is going to take on that amount. The description is going to come from F, right? And then all this information, that frequency information that we've saved for this member plan, it's going to come directly from here. So that's what these are. All of these are the recurring details. It's going to simply take it, right? First of all, I want to set the recurring to true. What is that? On our invoice right here, remember I have a dedicated training on this. I want to set this to true. If I unselect this, that's based on B2. If I select it, notice B2 goes to true. These three options, email to customer, save to file, and print out, are based on these three here, 9 through 11. So I want to make sure to set all these to true, and I want to set B2 to true. So those are for the options, making sure that this is reoccurring, right? So if they're all to false, it's not going to help us, right? So we want to make sure that they're all set to true. So we do that through here, B2, B9 through B11, set recurring options to true. Recurring, let's just put in options because they are options to true. Okay, and next up, I want to load all that data, the frequency, and all of that data is going to come into the individual fields, coming directly from those individual columns, J, K, L, M, N, and O. That's all coming from here, right? J, K, L, all these rows all the way to O, going to come directly inside here. So it's just basically filling in that. It's relatively easy, just value to value. There's no data mapping that's associated with that. Okay, then what I want to do is I want to activate that invoice sheet, right? We want to make sure to activate that sheet as soon as we click on that button. I want that sheet to be activated. So we do that. That's the last line of code. Now it is all filled in. That's relatively easy. All we need to do is then just save and update that invoice. That macro I've gone over in the previous weeks. Recurring invoice. Remember, I'll include the link for this training below so you don't have to worry about that. All right, great. So we've got that. We can change that update. We want to do that. All right, so we know now how to create it. So what about deleting a member? If we delete a member, if I delete a member, do you want to delete this member? Click no. But let's choose a member where I don't have much data, which is this Fretters. If I want to delete this member, all I want to do is delete the data. At least we're just going to delete the member list located here. So when we do that, deleting that member, the macro assigned to that, click yes, and it's going to delete that member. It's going to delete the member, and then all of a sudden it's going to just click new member, so it's going to clear all those fields out. So that's how we do that. So it's relatively simple here. First of all, we want to get them an option. Are you sure you want to delete this member with VB yes or no? If it's no, we're just going to exit the sub. All right, we want to make sure now they may have deleted a member. If I decide I want to create a new member and I want to call this, let's say Jeff, right? And I want to put a member, give them a member status of, let's say, pending. And I decide I want to delete this member. This member has not been saved yet. There's no member associated with that. So we want to make sure that we've actually created a row. So how do we do that? So if I decide I want to delete this member, right, we say yes, and it's going to basically just clear out the contents, right? So now we have, this should have been deleted, right? Let's double check that again, delete, and then yes. Okay, let's clear that out. We're going to fix that error. So that we want to make sure that the row associated with that is deleted. So let's pull that up. That row is going to be 12, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at a member list. That is the correct row, but we've incorrectly, probably my fault. Of course it's my fault. Okay, B5, we're going to check that out with you right now. So the member rows look B5, right? Not B3. B5 is that member row. We need to make sure that we're deleting the wrong members here. And all right, B5 here, we're going to put that in there. Change that up there, and also want to make sure the database is right. Remember database here. Okay, so we got that there. So we got the correct sheet and the correct ID, and now we'll go ahead and run this macro. Fretters, let's go ahead and pull him up here, and then we'll go ahead and delete the member. Yes, we do want to delete it. Going into the member list here, we see that it is now gone. Perfect. Okay, so we're set up on the delete. That's now working, and then we'll go ahead and load another one so we can see it. All right, so we've covered new, save, delete, create the invoice, add the picture, clear the picture. We still want to do print ID. Well, that's relatively easy here. And here's the beauty of it, right? This actually, there's no color background on this. So when we go into formulas, right? Actually, the page layout here, if I delete that background, you're going to see there's actually no color. It is the background picture, right? So when I do that, and I'll include this picture if you want to get that picture into the page layout, background, right? I've created a specific background. I'm using this background right here, this one right here. I'll include that, of course, in our Patreon resources. Inserting that, it's going to add that insert. And the nice thing about it is, if I decide I want to print a range, let's say I want to print the range from J8 all the way through J17. If I print it, there's nothing on the background. That background's not going to show us because it's not a color, it's a picture, right? So we get a nice, so when we print that ID, it's going to print to my Snagit printer, which is my default printer. And so you're going to take a look. You see how you get this nice, there's no background, right? You get this nice ID card. So it's a real advantage to using that. And to do that, all we need to do is set that just to ensure. I did that through the macro, although you can do that. All we want to do is just set the print range. I'm going to set that print range from J8 through J17. Now you can do it right here inside the print area, or you can do it with VBA. So let's take a look at that inside that print ID card macro. So first thing what we're going to do is members page setup, setting that print area through J8 through J17, setting that print area, set print area. And then next thing, another line of code, all we need to do is just print it out using the members print out. And I just want to make sure a few things are true and false. And what does that mean? Well, we want to set it to the active printer. Right? If you have a list of printer, you could send it to a specific printer here, or also you could print it to the file if you wanted to. And we certainly don't want to ignore those print areas. So we want to maintain those. So we have that as false. That is it for the print ID card. Relatively simple. So that's just going to print it out to whatever your default printer is. Okay, so great. We've covered all the member IDs. Now remember, I wanted to show you the member plans. So we're going to cover the member plans macros. These are the macros that are associated with the member plans. And then after that, I'm going to show you this, just a little bit of macro that's going to automatically add this really cool fade out message to the sign in and sign out, and automatically sign people in or out based on the criteria. So that's what we're going to go over. Now the member plans is relatively simple. All I want to do is pull up, create a little form here, and I want to pull up some information. So what I want to do is I want a new plan. It's going to clear out a plan. We're going to call this test weekly. And we want to create a weekly plan. Maybe we want to build them weekly for personal training or something like that. And we'll just call the plan amount. Let's say we're going to do $50 a week, and we'll call it personal training. And so after we do that, all we want to do is set the frequency. So how often should we bill a member? Let's call it every week. Maybe we want to bill them every Monday. So we can do every Monday. So we're going to bill them every Monday. And we want to create this bill, let's just say 3 days before. So maybe we're going to create it on Friday for Monday. So we're going to save that plan. And what's going to do is going to put that plan directly in the bottom. So we just saved it. Going to save all that frequency here. Here we have a form and a database inside the existing sheet. Nice when you want to create a little bit of something. So all we have to do is just run a few macros: new plan, save plan, and delete plan. Relatively simple. Delete plan is going to do the same thing. We're not going to delete it. So how do we do that? Also, what I want to do is when I select a plan, I want the details of that plan to load in here. So how do we do that? Well, again, we're going to use data mapping. And if we look here, we see those rows go from 13 to 15. So we've hidden it. Now you're probably going to ask me, well, why didn't I put data mapping way down here or somewhere down here? Well, in this case, if I delete a row, that row is going to change. So if we put data mapping above the database, it's never going to change. This way we can delete rows without any issue. So if I take a look inside 14, which is hidden, we see we've got data mapping. And I've got data mapping here, and I'm skipping here. We've got a merged cell. So this particular frequency summary is going to take on, there's one thing I missed to show you on the other screen. Now I got to show you that to you. There's one thing, which was that barcode. So we see that it's got a merged cell here, right? So monthly, we've got merge cell. So what we're going to do is we're going to run data mapping. I'm going to run it for the first 4 columns, and then I'm going to run it for the last 6 columns. And we're going to skip 2 columns. One more thing before I don't want to forget. This barcode here, we're going to use a specific font called Free 3 of 9. I'm going to include this font inside. It's free. You can find it on Google, of course. I'll also include it inside our Patreon resources. Now, this particular one, to get that ID, all I need to do is create another text file. I just missed to show you this one. And we're going to call it right here. So this is the last thing that I missed on it. So to get an accurate barcode for using, when we use 3 of 9, that is Free 3 of 9, that is the font, right? All you need to do is take that font and put it in your fonts folder, and it'll then be available inside your fonts here. So I've created a string, I've created a shape, and that shape is connected to B16. So whatever's located in B16 is going to be displayed. I've then set a font for the shape called Free 3 of 9. Now to do this, as opposed to just going directly to the ID, right? It's basically, this is the ID, but it will not be the correct barcode unless we surround it by the asterisk. So we can do that here. So this is tied to B16. So this is the asterisk and sign B4, which is this, of course, is the member ID and the asterisk. This is the correct way. This way the barcode will display correctly and also be scanned. Now it looks the same, but when it's scanned, this is the correct way as far as 3 of 9. Asterisk and the ID, and then another asterisk. So because it's not exactly the same as member, I've put the asterisk here. Now all we need to do is tie this particular shape to B16 and set the font code. Now keep in mind that if you enter this, right, if you double click this and go in, it's going to reset that font. It could do, or actually if we reset it here. So sometimes the font will get reset. So keep that in mind. Notice I just hit enter in this and it got reset. When you enter here and you click enter, it's going to reset that font. All you need to do is go back into your fonts here, whichever one, find the font that you were using, which was Free 3 of 9, right? I think it was 3 of 9. Enter that one, and it's going to be, and then go ahead and reset. Also, the size got reset too. So I think it was like 20 or something like that. No, maybe 30. So all we have to do is just that. It was way up there. We go, something that's too big. So keep that in mind, so that if you enter that, so that's all we have to do to create that barcode font. Okay, so let's continue back on where we left off inside our member plans here. So we know that we're going to run a loop using match data, but we're going to skip a few columns. Why will we skip a column? Because there's no data in this column. So we know we need to skip. We have column 4, 5, 6, 7, skipping 8 and 9 and moving on to 10. So we're going to do that. That's going to be both when we're loading the data from the selected row. And we also want to use conditional formatting here for the selected row. That selected row is located on B2. So B2 is going to do that. So if we use selection change, so let's go into that and then take a look inside our member plans. We have just a little bit of code inside this worksheet, and it's based on selection change. When a user selects D15 through basically any row, we also need to make sure that there's some value in column D. If they select down here, nothing's going to happen, but if they select here, we want to load that plan. So when they make a selection from D through 099 and D contains a value, then what I want to do is to take whatever row they've selected and place it directly inside B2. That'll trigger that conditional formatting. And then we're going to run a macro to load that plan. It is that macro that is located in our member plan macros, right? So we have save update and we have load. So we'll go into order. So we'll go into order as we move down. We'll go into the load, but you see how the load gets triggered. That macro is located right here, but we'll go in order. The first thing what I want to do is save update. So when we're saving it, you saw it in action already when we saved the test weekly. So when we click save, it is the same macro. Notice we've got another fade out message there. Save plan, it's click there. So when we do that, we need to differentiate between it. If it's an existing, right? We know that if a new plan, we're going to clear out whatever's in B2. When I click new plan, I want to clear out whatever's in B2. So we know if B2 is empty, it is a new plan. However, if B2 contains a value, it is an existing plan. We can use that as our differentiator. We also want to make sure that they've at least created a name for that plan, which is located in E3. So if E3 with the member plan sheet is empty, we are going to make sure that they add a plan name before saving. All right. And also if B2 is empty, then we know it is a new plan, right? B2 new plan. Otherwise, it is an existing plan. So if it's a new plan, we need to set the plan row based on the first available row in column D, right on the existing sheet. And we also want to set that plan row in B2, right? It was empty. Now we can do. Otherwise, if it's an existing plan, we already know putting that into a variable. Again, we're going to run a loop, but this time we're skipping 2 columns, just as I said. If the plan column equals 8 or 9, then go to skip, right? There's no data in those 2 columns because we're using a merged cell, right? So we can just skip those 2 columns, skipping this column and skipping this column because it is our frequency summary contains 3 different columns in a merged cell. So that's how we deal with a merged cell. So then all we're going to use again using data mapping based on whatever's located in row 14. That is going to give us our range. And then all we're going to do is just going to place those values up. We already went over data mapping. We know that E3 is the plan name, is going to be here. We know that amount is located in H3 here. So data mapping, that is going to save it. Then all we need to do is run that fade out message. Save it. This is exactly the same. It's no difference. We're just using a different shape here. So plan load, all we're going to do is clearing out the existing contents. If B2 is empty, we're going to exit the sub, right? We can't load anything unless we actually have a row to load, which is located in B2. So we want to make sure that we have that. All right, assuming it's not empty, again, all we're going to be doing is running a loop. This time we're simply reversing, right? We're going to take whatever's inside the cells, the plan row and the plan column, we're placing it directly inside this cell, which is located in row 14, not including columns 8 and 9. That's it. That loads the data. Very simple on that. Adding new, all we're doing is clearing contents and selecting a cell. Deleting, relatively simple. All we're going to be doing is making sure if B2 is empty, we're just going to go to no saved. All it's going to do is just go down here and then run the macro that's going to clear out those cells. But if B2 is not empty, all we need to do is put that row into a variable and then delete that row, which will be done right here. That's it for delete. That's it for plans. Now we've got a little bit more. Notice that we have a frequency summary here, right? It's very nice. We need to know bill member every 1 month. This didn't work. I'm going to fix that up. Bill member should be every 1 week, right? That's very important, right? So how do we do that? I want to make sure that that summary contains exactly what we're doing. So we're going to do that with this formula here. We've got a summary here, but notice this formula, it was a formula, but it's gone now because I want to make sure that we're not loading this formula, right? So notice here, that was a little mistake I made, right? This summary, right? We don't want to load it. In other words, there should be a formula here. I'll fix that in a moment. But what we don't want to do is we can load whatever that summary is in here. We can load it in the details, but we don't want to put that back in B3 because this is the formula that calculates all of this. And we don't want to put it back in B3. So how do we do that? Well, we want to make sure we exclude this column as well. Not only 8 and 9, but 7 as well, but only on load. So on load, what we need to do is exclude that, right? So loading, we want to do if plan column equals, we're going to change that, right? Also on 7. Okay, so I'm going to copy that and I'll put 7, 8, or 9, right? But saving it is fine. 7, 8, or 9. Now let's go over that formula. And basically what I want is a dynamic formula based on whatever the frequency is, okay? So we can hide this because it's ugly. And okay, so what I want to do is I want to start it out with bill member every. So let's copy that. So equals, and then what we'll do is put bill member every, and then the frequency, right? We don't know how long the frequency is going to be, and here's the frequency, 1, and then we'll do and then quotation marks, a space, and then another and. We don't know, here's weeks, this could be days, weeks, or months, so we're going to select on that, and another space, and then how often do we going to do it? On every last day of the month or whatever, you know, it's based on this. On, and then comes this, if, and let's do another and we'll do a space and then an and if this here equals days We'll put days because days are going to be very simple. Let's put days because days is the first option here. Then what do we have? Then basically is nothing else to do, right? Then nothing, right? Okay. Because if it's days, so there's nothing more, right? Bill every 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, right? There's nothing else. But if it's weeks, well, we need to certainly add on what day. So if this is equal to weeks, G7 equals, and then weeks, put in the weeks here, then what do we want to show? Well, then we need to know the frequency. Then what are we going to do? Then if it's true, we're going to show, let's see, we have a space. We've already got a space. Then on, we can do on, selecting here, and space here, and then another and then Monday, right? Okay, great. But what if it's months? If it's months, it's a little bit different. So let's just take a look at that. So if it's false, we'll just keep it empty. And then so up there. Okay, so there we go there. Let's end that. Let's just finish that off for now. And we're going to add months right there. Take a look at that. Going to empty that out, clear that out. And then, okay, so now we've covered days and weeks. So let's take a look, expand that. Bill every 1 week on Monday. I like that. And then days, we have bill a member every 1 day. Okay, I like that too. But the only thing we need to do is now add in months here. So what if it's months? If it's months, we need to show everything. So let's take a look at that. Bill every 1 month, right? But on every last day of the month, right? So I will need to include this, and this if it's months. So let's add that in right now. Instead of this, we're going to put in here this on every. We could put probably put on every. Let's add in on, space on, and then a space, and then F9 on every last, and then another and day here, and then another and then another space, and then the last one, day's description of the month. Okay, so there we go. So let's take a look at that and see how that works. Okay, so now if it's on bill member every 1 month on every last day of the month. Okay, we just need to put a space in between last day, right, on every last day, and that would be this F and G, F9 and G9. So we're going to do space and then another and. So great. So now we have every month last day. So what if we change this to, let's say, every 3rd Tuesday of the month? So now member on every 4th Wednesday of the month. Perfect. So now we've got our frequency set up. We know it's not going to be copied over. We're going to save our work here. And now when we notice that when I load it, the formula doesn't change, right? We don't want, right, when I load this, I don't want this value here to be put in B3, right? We don't want that. Keep that in mind. We don't want it put in B3. So we excluding columns 7, 8, and 9. Okay, good. I like that. That'll probably happen to you. You'll make that mistake. But basically when we save it, we want B3 to come into here. But when we load it, we don't want whatever's in this column to come into back. So it's one directional, one way. Saving yes, loading no. Okay, so now we have a dynamic. So I want this dynamic frequency summary to put in here. All right, so now let's take a look inside here. Every 1 week, so let's save that plan. So now we notice that the frequency summary updated correctly. Bill member every week on Monday. Okay, good. So we've got that, and let's continue down there. So we know that member load, we've excluded column 7, which is what we want because it's a formula, excluding blank or formula. And now add new, simply clearing it. We deleting it is relatively simple. So we've covered all the macros here. Relatively simple sheet. All we're going to be doing is saving. Lastly, and then I'm going to let you go, we got this sign in and sign out, right? So how do we do this? It's going to be based on this database. So basically what I want to do is to have the user either scan in using a barcode scanner, which works just fine, or selecting the thing. And I want to show whether they've signed in. Notice she just signed in on December 24th. But if I click this, Jesus, I don't know what ID, let me click that. Let's take a look inside our sign in out database. Notice this one right here, 10127, signed in, but now we need to sign her out, right? We need to know the difference. So that was 10127, Lisa here. Now it says has been signed out on Saturday, December 21st. So she signed in. If I do it one more time, she's going to sign in, right? Has been signed in. So we need to know whether she's been signing in or out, okay? Based on that, based on the data. So how do we know that? All of that data is going to be saved in here. We know if there's a sign in. Notice that this is sign in and this is sign out. We know if the sign out is empty, they have already signed in, but they have not signed out. However, we also know that if D is filled in, then we need to know what they've signed out. Okay, so we've also got some named ranges. So let's take a look at some of the fields inside this. It's relatively simple. If we move over to columns, so we have that here. And what I want to do is I've got some information here that we're going to show it in. This is the fade. Let's color this area. So I want to know it. making sure that it's not blank. I don't want to delete that like I just did. There we go. Okay, so now what I want to do is I need some information. I want to know if it's been found on a database row. And we can use a really cool formula. What I want to know is, has this member, I want to know the last basically the row in which it's been found. Which row? That ID, right? If I select ID, I want to know what is the last row it's been found. It's like a reverse match. I want to know the last possible row. If we take a look inside our sign in and out database, I'm going to bring it over here. What I want to know is the last instance of this. I want to find the last row that it is available. And then I want to check to see if it's been empty. So how do we get that last row? Well, we can use this. We can use a really, really cool formula. Using this, basically we're going to look for all the instances of this, and we're going to do Control-Shift-Enter because it is a range. We're going to use the max formula. We're going to find all the instances, and then I want to find the max based on the row, so the maximum row in which it's been found. And what is that's been found? It's going to be based on the sign out member ID. This is a named range based on all the member IDs, dynamic names, of that database that I just showed you. We're looking for whatever's in E8, right? No, there's nothing in E8 now. Okay, so I want to find all of the instances on that range. And notice that you're going to use, it is a range, so it is an array, so we're going to use Control-Shift-Enter to make sure that we add the brackets around that since we're focused on that entire range array. So we're looking for all the rows that are associated with this. So basically, it is based on this member ID, and we're going to subtract the minimum number of rows, right? I want to know the minimum and then adding 1 if it's 0. Then I'm going to add 2 onto that because our first run starts on, let me do Control-Shift-Enter because I didn't do that there. So Control-Shift-Enter will make sure that it's an array there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look for that. Now notice our first one starts on row 3, so we need to add 2. I want to know the row. So if what 10127 is, I want to know the row associated with that. And we've got some macros that are associated with that. So that is going to be based directly on the sheet. So we look at the sign in, sign out sheet. When we make a change, right, if it's a correct ID, I'm going to stop the code here and we're going to take a quick look at that. So when I've entered 101.127, this particular one, we've stopped the code just as we want to, and we see that it's been found on row 47. So it is the last instance of 101.27. If we look on here, we see 47, and we also see that she's signed in, but she has not signed out yet. So using this formula, so now all we need to do, we know the row that the last instance is, we know the current date, and I also want to know the row that's associated with this member. All we're going to be using is just a simple match formula using the member ID. So I know that that member, 10127, is located on row 8. Meaning, if we go into the member row, we look in this, we know that 10127, Lisa Perkins, is located on row 8. Okay, so we have that information. Now what we want to do is continuing on with our code. We know the first thing I want to make sure that they've selected a correct member. B8 must have a value, right? Otherwise it's not a member. If B8 contains empty, we know let them know that please enter a correct member ID. We're going to clear the contents. We're going to select that target and let them automatically enter a new one. What else? It is a correct ID. Okay, now we need to determine, is it a new sign-in or not, right? If I look at row 47 and I see that D is empty, then I know that it's not a new sign-on. We know that the last instance of it, we know that they've signed in, but they haven't signed out. However, for example, in this instance, we know if they've signed out already, then it is a sign in. So we need to differentiate between whether it's a sign in or whether it's a sign out. And we can use the value or non-existent value in D to determine that. So we can do that here. If B6 value equals empty, we need to have a value in B6. Let's take a look in that. B6 has to have a row, then we know if B6 is not found, we can give them a new row. It's possible that there's no data, so if B6 is equals to empty, or why would B6 be empty? Maybe it's a brand new data sheet. Maybe they've never used it and it's not found at all. That's possible. Or if D and the associated row is not empty, then we need to know to use a brand new row, right? So, or sign in out database, D, then the B6 value, which is the row that's associated, does not equal empty, then it is a new sign in. In that instance, what we want to do is determine the row. The sign up database row here is going to be able to first available database row plus 1. This is going to be our new row. Then what we're going to do is I want to put that member ID, I want to put that directly in column A. I want to put the current date, just the date, only the date, in column B. I want to put the sign in time on column C. So that's what we're going to do. A is going to take on the member ID. B7, we have the current date set in B7. We could easily just use today, but we're putting in B7. B7 contains that formula, which is today here. That's just a formula here in B7 equals today. So I just chose to use a cell so that we could change that. If we're testing it, we can easily change it. If we use it in the code, then we can only use today. Okay, so then we also want to set that sign in time. That's going to be now, the current date and time. And I want to put that row. This may become into use in future. Why would you want to put a row in here? Well, I might want to put a row in here because let's take a look inside our database row. Now let's say we've associated a row. And remember, those sign in times come in on the member ID. If I know the row, and we should put the row in here too. If I know that row here, right, then I can make a change. So like, for example, inside our sign in out history here, let's reset the code here. Here we'll reset the code. And then if we go inside our sign in out history, what if I want to add some notes to this, right? If I want to decide I want to add notes to this, I need to know what row has been associated with this timeout. So if I know that I add rows, maybe I just want to add something. And if I make a change here, if I know the row that's associated, if I bring over the row in a hidden column here or here, we can make a change to that and it'll automatically change. So that's why we brought the row in for future. So, but the row would go here right inside O. So I need to update that code here to make sure that all results come from all the way from K to O. So I think I need to do that. Inside the member, let's just take a quick look at that. The member macros, right? We're focused on this one here, the ID history, K through O, sign out history. So if I do that, bring a note, that row would kind of be helpful. Although we're not using it, we got to reload the member here. Let's reload that. Okay, so now we've got that. It's going to show up here. And now if we take a look inside that, we've got those rows associated here. All right, perfect. Continuing on where we left off, entering this, again, it's going to stop that code where we've got it. We've got the row associated here. So we're going to take a look, continue on with the code. Everything for brand new, adding that row in. What if it's an existing database, right? Remember, if D is not empty, if D is empty, we are going to add it. But what if it's empty? If D is empty, we know it's an existing database row, right? D is empty, so we have to add in that sign out. We know, right? D, sign out is empty, sign in is already existing, sign out is empty, so we need to sign them out. So we're going to add that value directly into D. All we need to do is take that sign out time, the current date and time, and put it directly in D. That's just what we're going to do right here. Else, the sign in database row is going to be located in B6 here. And then what we want to do is just going to take the current date and time and put it directly inside column D in the database row. That's it. That's all we have to do to add the data. But now what I want to do is I want to add that fade out message. So continuing on with the code, removing that stop, there's a fade out message that you saw. If you take a look inside here, right, putting that another one, we see we've got a Betty White has been signed out on September data, right? Signed out, right? And then it fades out. But if we take that same person here, we put it in here and we take a look at that, now she says she's been signed in. So you see it's difference between sign out and sign in. The message is going to change based on whether she's signed in or signed out. Now whatever's here, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the code, or actually what I can do is just show all the features. Let's click this here, the selection change. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to unhide these shapes here. And notice that the transparency, right, is not. So it's probably better if we just show what's in. So let's take a look inside here. So now what we have is we have this. So I'm going to stop this code right here, actually right here. Before we get that, I'm going to run a brand new. And what that's going to do is just going to simply stop that right where I want it up. So notice it's been, so let's close this out here. And so you see here, we've got the fill transparency. We're going to change that fill transparency, but basically we have some text. Now, if we take a look at this shape, we see that this shape is based on B10. We've also got a picture associated. So this here is called the member message here. This here is called the member pics. We're dealing with two different shapes here. And what we want to do is we want to put some dynamics text, whether they've been signed in or signed out, and the date that we've done it. So B10 is going to hold that information for us. So if we take a look inside B10, we see a little bit of a formula here. And we're going to focus on there. What I want to do is I want to index the member name. I want to know the member name. The first thing I want to do is show that member name. That's dynamic content. We know the member row here located in B8. So if I index the member name based on the matching, whatever their ID is in E8, right? I could also use the row. Member ID is here. and 1, right? We're indexing that based on the matching of the member ID, and we're going to index the member name. That's going to display this right here is going to display their name. Now what I need to know is more dynamic content. Has been, won't change. But I want to know, have they been signed out or signed in? So what I can do is, how do we know that? Remember, we know that they've been signed out. If this is blank, D is blank, we know that they've been signed in but not signed out. So we can use that. So continuing on inside this formula here, we're going to index based on column D of the sign in and out database, right? If it's empty, we know that we can put in signed in on, right? So that we've already added the data, and we can put signed in on because they just got added, right? We know D is empty. They've just been signed in. They have not been signed out because D is not full. Signed in on, right? Or otherwise, if it's false, that means D contains a value, right? They've been signed out on, right? So either signed in on or signed out on is dynamic based on the contents of column D in that specific row, right? We know the row is located in B6 here. So we know that then what we want to do is simply add the date and time. We can use the text to format it and the now to give that current value, the current date and time. Then I want to format it based on, I want to give that full day name. Using 4 Ds will give us that full day name. Using 4 Ms will give us that full month name. Using a single D will give us the day number. And then using the Ys will go. And then what I want to do is I want to format that time. I want to put the word at in. Notice it says at. Then I want to put AM, PM based on the American, and then 1H, 2 Ms for the hours and minutes, AM or PM. Otherwise, if there's an error, put nothing. And what that's going to do is do just that. It's going to put that text. Okay, so we know how we get the text, the dynamic text, whether it's sign in or sign out. How do we get this picture? Well, the picture is going to be through VBA. Let's continue on with our code. Continuing on that fade out message. And we're going to continue down here. So we've covered this. We know we're going to calculate that. That's going to help on the formulas. What I want to do now is check for that member picture. So first of all, I want to make sure that we have the folder. If that folder, that member picture located in the setup doesn't equal empty, then we're going to set that picture folder in a variable. Of course, we're adding the backslash onto it. I want to know the member row. We know that that's in B8. Member row is very important because in our member list, I need to check column K and that member row. If column K contains a value and we know it's a correct picture name, then we can add that picture in too. So we can do that. The member row is going to be based on B8. That picture path is going to be located on the picture folder and the member database, column K, and the member row. This is the full picture path. We just need to make sure that it is an accurate path. To do that, we can check the directory of that picture path, the VB directory. If that is not empty, or maybe sometimes it contains a period, that's possible, and that would be incorrect. If either one of those are correct, right? If it is equal to empty or contains a period, then we're going to skip it and go to no picture. I just want to skip and go right to here. However, if it is correct, all we need to do is do shapes, member picture, set the full user picture equal to the picture path. This is going to add the member picture, add member picture to that shape that we've already created called member pick. Okay, so now all we need to do is just run that fade out message. All we need to do is take that shape, right? But now this is a little bit interesting because we haven't done this before. This one, there's 2 shapes. Notice that there's actually 2 shapes. Both the member picture and the message both are faded out. So we can just add that information. So we're going to focus primarily on the member message. However, we are also going to set the member, not only are we going to set that member message to visible, we're also going to set the member picture to visible. Then what we're going to do is we're going to change that fill transparency as we run through it, but we're also going to do the member picture fill transparency. Of course, we have to call out this because we're focused on this, but this is just another way to do fill transparency. We're also going to do the member picture. Same thing here. As we add the visible equals false for the member message, we also need to do the visible false for the member picture. So this is how we fit out 2 different shapes at the same time. And then the last thing, we're just going to simply clear out the contents of E8. And I've just commented this out because we were working with it on another sheet. It's going to create an issue. In other words, if I try to run that macro and I've selected another sheet, if I try to select this cell, it would create a bug, but it works just fine. I want to make sure that this cell is collected. Now, whether using a scanner or barcode, this is going to work just fine. It's going to allow us to members to scan in and scan out. All right, this was really cool. Now, keep in mind a few things as a summary. If you do like this recurring invoice, you did not see the video, I'm going to include the link down below for recurring invoices. Also, I'm going to include another video, also link. If you want to learn how to create this invoice from scratch on a basic level, I'll include that link down below. So creating an invoice from scratch or the recurring feature that allows us to reoccur these, I'm going to do that too. Also, just one other thing on the save update inside the invoice, inside the macro for this, all we're doing is we're saving that brand new invoice list here. I'm saving the member ID to column D. So that was the only difference that we're doing. So everything else is the same, and I've changed this to member and chef, but we're just adding the member ID. So that was important on that because we needed that criteria so we know all the invoices associated with that member. So that was the only thing that we've added on that. Everything else is the same. I hope you do like these trainings. In this specific training, I showed you how to create your own application membership manager complete with horizontal tabs, ID card printing, billing history, scan in and out history, a full member plans, creating additional member plans with your own database and own form inside a single sheet, how to reoccur invoices and add that data and automatically save and update, and of course, a really cool sign in and out screen that you can use with any barcode scanner with a fade out message, dynamic fade out message. It's been a great training. If you want to see something else in this, you want me to add something, fix something, you want me to focus on a certain area, I'm doing that inside our Patreon campaign. That's a great way to support these trainings up on Patreon. You get tons of features. You get full PDF codebooks so you can study the code in a really organized PDF codebook. I've also got features such as brand new content. I've got older content that we're adding PDF workbooks. I'm also adding, you can get these trainings and the downloads earlier than everybody else. So we've got early release. Of course, all the resources, all the pictures, and all the icons that are associated with this, I'll include there on Patreon, plus a ton of other features. So I do hope you'll join us there. Thank you very much for this training. We will see you next week for a brand new training. Thanks so much.